The Kingswood smelled of iron and wet earth and fear. Men said later that the boar had been monstrous, that it had come out of the brush like a black boulder given tusks, that it had taken 3 spears and still it charged. Those were the sort of lies a man used to braid meaning into panic. The truth was only that the beast had found the soft place under Robert Baratheon's ribs, where the mail parted when he turned, laughing too loudly, certain he was still the young storm that broke princes. He did not die there. That, in the end, was the only strange thing. Robert lay on his side in the mire, a great red-gold mass of a man made suddenly small by how still he was. His beard was clotted with rain and spit. His hunting tunic was ruined, split open by knives, and beneath it the wound gaped like a mouth that could not stop talking. Every breath bubbled darkly. Every cough dragged a fresh string of pain across the faces around him. Men shouted orders no one listened to. Horses stamped and snorted, rolling white eyes at the torch flame. The dead boar lay a few paces away, its bristles slicked down, its tusks still bright as bone. Someone had broken the spear off in it and left the shaft jutting like a dead branch. Ser Barristan Selmy knelt with the steady calm of a man who had held worse things together with his hands. He pressed cloth to the wound until his fingers cramped, then shifted and pressed again. "No more wine," he snapped when someone offered it, as if the word itself were a blade. "Not a drop. Bind him tight. Gods be good. Bind him." "Bind the king," someone echoed, and the absurdity of it. Binding Robert Baratheon, who had once swung a hammer that seemed to drag thunder behind it, made a young man laugh hysterically and then gag. Robert's eyes were half open. They were not focusing on anything. They were blue gone dull, like a sky after a storm had spent its lightning. When he tried to speak, it came out as a wet rasp. A hand, huge, inked with bruises and old scars, clawed weakly at Barristan's sleeve. "Bess?" Robert breathed, or perhaps it was best. Or perhaps it was only pain-given sound. His lips pulled back from his teeth.
Ned.
"Quiet, your grace," Barristan said, and the honorific sounded like prayer. "Save your strength." Robert Baratheon had spent it like coin for 15 years, buying laughter and noise and forgetfulness. Now there was none left to spend. They lifted him onto a litter made from spears and cloaks, for men on each side, and the forest path turned into a slow, lurching procession. Each jolt dragged a groan from Robert's chest. The rain fell harder, cold and stupid and impartial, making the torches hiss. Somewhere deeper in the Kingswood, wolves began to howl, thin, distant voices that did not care which king bled. A rider tore ahead with a cloak wrapped around his head, galloping for the city. The message would arrive before the litter did. The king was gored, the king was dying, the king had drunk himself into a foolish death. Rumor always ran faster than truth, especially in King's Landing. By the time the gates of the Red Keep swallowed them, Robert had stopped moaning. He was breathing, yes. Barristan could see the rise and fall beneath the blankets, but his eyes were rolled up beneath heavy lids, and his mouth hung open as if he had been surprised into silence. Grand Maester Pycelle met them at the foot of the steps with his chain glinting and his hands trembling. He made a show of dismay, of sacred urgency, of age and helplessness, and then he began giving orders in the practiced voice of a man who had stood beside too many bedsides and watched the powerful die. "Milk of the poppy," Pycelle said. "We must ease his pain. The gods grant that we can." "No," Barristan said again, harsh as a blade's edge. "Not until we've stopped the bleeding. He needs stitches. He needs heat. He needs rest," Pycelle insisted, already reaching for a cup. His watery eyes slid, just for a heartbeat, past Barristan's shoulder, up to where the red stone corridors began. A movement there, a flash of pale hair, a swish of green silk. Cersei Lannister did not run. Queens did not run. She came down the steps like a procession, her face smooth, her eyes bright and hard as gemstones. Her hands were empty. Her grief, if she felt it, was kept where no one could touch it. She looked at Robert once. Not with love, not even with hatred. With calculation, as a merchant might look at a ship that had taken on water. "My lord husband," she said softly. "Gods." And then, in the same breath, "Bring him to his chambers. Close the doors. No one enters without my word." Barristan's jaw tightened. "The king's chambers are." "His chambers," she repeated, and it became an order. The Red Keep had long grown used to obeying Cersei Lannister when Robert Baratheon was laughing. It obeyed her now that he was not. They carried him through torchlit corridors and tapestries that showed dragons burning cities long dead. Servants pressed back against the walls, mouths covered, eyes wide. Somewhere, a child began to cry and was hushed. The air smelled of beeswax and damp wool and the faint, sharp scent of crushed herbs. Robert was laid on his bed like a slab of meat set down for carving. Pycelle fussed. Barristan watched. Cersei stood at the foot of the bed and did not move. "Send for Lord Eddard Stark," she said at last, as if remembering. "He must be told. He is hand. He will wish to." She let the sentence trail, a silken noose. Yes, Barristan thought. He will wish to, and you will wish him not to. Outside, bells began to toll. Not the great city bells that rang for war or wedding, but the smaller bells of servants running and guards shifting and doors being barred. King's Landing had the feel of a ship that had struck something hidden under the water. All hands suddenly alert, every man listening for the sound of breaking. Robert Baratheon's chest fell, rose again. He did not die, but the realm, sensing the gap between breath and command, began to move as if he already had. Eddard Stark learned the news from a boy who could not keep his breath, a red-cheeked runner with mud on his boots and terror in his eyes. The words tumbled out in pieces: Boar, blood, the king, until Ned caught the boy by the shoulders and forced sense into the storm. He listened without showing what it did to him. That was a Stark trick, learned in cold halls where grief had always been a private thing. But when the boy finished, Ned's hand remained on his shoulders a heartbeat too long, and his fingers tightened as if he were holding the world in place by sheer will. "Where is he?" Ned asked. "In his chambers," the boy panted. "The Queen," she said. Of course she did. Ned walked, and the Red Keep seemed to rearrange itself around him. Doors were shut that were usually open. Guards stood in pairs where one would have sufficed. Voices dropped as he passed. Faces turned away. It was not sorrow that filled those corridors. It was appetite. Varys appeared as if summoned by thought, silk whispering, hands folded in the practiced humility of a man who knew every secret passage and every overheard prayer. "Lord Hand," he murmured, eyes soft. "How terrible, how very terrible. The gods can be so capricious." "Capricious," Ned repeated, tasting the word like something spoiled. Varys' smile did not falter. "A hunting accident, they say. Tragic. But they say," Ned cut in. He did not stop walking. "Who says?" "Why, everyone says, my lord. The servants, the guards, the stable boys. It is already everywhere." Varys kept pace with him with no apparent effort. It is astonishing how quickly a city speaks when it is frightened. Ned's boots struck stone in a steady rhythm. "Is the king conscious?" Varys hesitated, just long enough to let Ned hear the hesitation. "Grand Maester Pycelle administers what comfort he may. I believe his grace sleeps." Ned thought of Robert asleep, mouth open, snoring loud enough to shame the walls, a cup knocked over on the table, laughter lingering in the air. This was not that sleep. He could feel it in the air, thick and sour. They reached the antechamber outside Robert's rooms. The doors were guarded by men in crimson cloaks with golden lions embroidered near the throat. Lannister men, in the king's hallways. Ned's mouth went thin. "Lord Hand," one of the guards said, as if the title itself were something he might not deserve much longer. "I will see the king." "The Queen." "I will see the king," Ned repeated, and in his voice was winter. The guard shifted uneasily. A second glance passed between them. Fear, deference, calculation. The doors opened. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the gray day. Candles burned in clusters, their light reflected in polished wood and gilt. The air smelled of milk of the poppy and blood. Robert lay in the bed, his massive frame reduced by blankets and stillness. His face was swollen on one side where he had bitten his tongue. His beard was crusted dark at the corners of his mouth. Pycelle hovered like a vulture disguised as a healer, chain clinking softly when he moved. Cersei sat in a chair beside the bed with her hands clasped in her lap, back straight, eyes fixed on nothing. She looked up as Ned entered. For a moment, there was something like relief in her face. Quick, then buried. "Lord Stark," she said, "you have come." "As you commanded," Ned said, and the words were polite enough to cut. Cersei's gaze flicked to Robert, then back. "My husband is gravely wounded." "Gravely," Pycelle echoed, eager. "The wound is deep, Lord Stark. The boar's tusk." "May I speak to the king?" Ned asked. Pycelle began to protest. Cersei lifted a hand, quieting him. "He is not awake," she said, "but you may sit. We must all do our duty, must we not?" Duty. Ned felt the word like a stone in his gut. Robert had never been good at duty. He had been good at breaking things, winning things, laughing. Duty had belonged to men like Ned and Stannis and, yes, Cersei in her own poisonous way. Ned moved closer to the bed. Robert's breath came shallowly, with a faint rattle at the end. Ned took his hand. It was warm, but the warmth was wrong, too fierce, feverish. He saw how Robert's nails were dark with dried blood where he had clutched at his own wound. A king's hand, made helpless. Ned bent close. "Robert," he whispered, as if the name could tether him. "It is Ned. I am here." Robert did not stir. Behind him, Cersei's voice was soft. "He cannot hear you." "He has heard worse," Ned said without turning. The silence that followed was thick. He felt Varys behind him, a presence like perfume, and perhaps Littlefinger too. Peter Baelish always seemed to be somewhere near the edge of any crisis, smiling like a man watching dice roll. "What will happen?" Cersei asked, and the question was a hook.
Ned straightened.
"The king will live," he said, because he needed it to be true. Cersei's mouth twitched. "If he does not?" "The realm has laws," Ned said. "Laws?" she echoed, and there it was again, that faint, almost amused disbelief. A charming notion, in a charmingly naive man. Ned turned to face her. Their eyes met, gray and green. "Do not mistake me," he said. "If the king dies, there will be justice." Cersei rose, the green silk of her gown whispering. "Justice," she said softly. "And who will see it done? You, a northern lord in a southern city, surrounded by my father's gold and my brother's swords? My lord, you are very brave, or very foolish." Ned did not flinch. "I am the hand, and I," Cersei said, "am the queen." She moved toward the door, her scent, flowers and something sharper, trailing behind. "Grand Maester," she said, "see that the king is kept comfortable. No unnecessary disturbances." When she was gone, Pycelle exhaled as if relieved. Varys leaned in a fraction. "It is so difficult," he murmured. "When grief and power share the same chamber." Ned released Robert's hand slowly, fell back onto the blankets with a soft thud, heavier than it should have been. Outside, the bells kept tolling, and every ring was a question. Who would answer when the king could not? Cersei did not go to her own chambers. She went instead to the places that belonged to no one and therefore could belong to her. The narrow passages behind the walls, the private staircases that servants used, the small rooms where men waited with messages and money. Her footsteps were measured. If she felt fear, it did not reach her face. There had been years, when she had sat at Robert's side and watched him drink and shout and forget, while she counted the days like a prisoner scratching marks into stone. She had imagined his death in 100 ways. She had never imagined him dying because he had wanted to impress a pack of men with how fearless he still was. Yet here it was. A boar, a stupid animal, had given her the chance the gods and dragons had denied her. In a little solar lined with books she never read, she found Pycelle waiting, wringing his hands as if they were laundry. He bowed so low his chain slid forward. "Your Grace," he breathed. Cersei closed the door behind her. The guards remained outside. "How long?" she asked. Pycelle's eyes darted. "The wound is grievous. The king's strength, his constitution." "Spare me the poetry," she said. "How long before he can speak? How long before he can sit? Sign. Command." Pycelle swallowed. "If the fever breaks, perhaps days. If it does not, and if he is kept comfortable?" Cersei asked, and her voice was mild. Pycelle understood mild voices. He had survived Targaryens and Baratheons and Lannisters by understanding them. He trembled. "The milk of the poppy will make him sleep," Cersei finished. "Yes." Pycelle nodded, eager. "It eases pain, Your Grace. It is merciful." "Mercy," Cersei said, and smiled without warmth. "Mercy is a word men use when they want you to thank them for taking what they need." She stepped closer, close enough that Pycelle could smell her perfume and the steel beneath it. "You will keep him alive," she said softly. "Not dead, not awake, alive." Pycelle's lips moved soundlessly for a moment. Then he bowed again, deeper. "As you command." Cersei turned away, already thinking of the next piece. The king alive but silent was a door left ajar. Many hands could slip through it. She needed the hinges. Peter Baelish was waiting where she expected him, leaning with casual grace against a pillar in a corridor that led toward the council chambers. His eyes were bright as coins. "Your Grace," he said, as though they were old friends meeting by chance. "Lord Baelish," she replied, and did not offer him the privilege of surprise. "You are quick." "I have always been quick," Peter said pleasantly. "It is my chief virtue, along with my humility." Cersei's mouth tightened. "The king is gravely injured." Peter's expression softened into something almost respectful. "How dreadful." "I will need the city watch," she said bluntly. There was no point fencing with Peter Baelish. He had built his life inside the fence and would always know where the boards were. Weak. Their loyalty. Their order. Peter's smile widened a fraction. Janos Slynt is a simple man. He likes simple things. Gold. Titles. A sense of importance. "Then give him those things," Cersei said. "Make him mine." Peter spread his hands. "Everything has a cost." Cersei stepped closer. "And everything has a consequence," she said. "Do you think you can buy consequences the way you buy men?" Peter's gaze held hers, unblinking. "I think," he said softly, "that consequences are the only true currency, Your Grace." For a heartbeat, she considered having him killed. It was a pleasant thought, quick, decisive, clean. But Peter Baelish was a knife that liked to be held. Better, for now, to keep it in her own hand. "You will do what I require," she said, "and you will be rewarded." Peter bowed, elegant. "As you wish." When she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back like the touch of a hand. Varys appeared at the turning of the corridor, as if he had been there the whole time. He offered her a look of gentle concern. "Your Grace," he said, "the realm prays for the king." "The realm prays for itself," Cersei replied. Varys' smile was faint. "The realm often confuses the two." Cersei stopped and faced him. "And you, Lord Varys? For whom do you pray?" Varys placed a hand over his heart. "For peace," he said. "For the small folk. For children who do not understand why men with crowns decide they must bleed." Cersei looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned away. Varys' prayers were always for something that benefited Varys. She went at last to the council chamber. The long table waited, polished and empty. On its walls were maps of the realm, painted in careful colors, as if borders were only lines and not the scars of wars. She stood at the head of the table where Robert usually sat when he bothered to attend, and she imagined what it would look like with another man in that chair. Stannis, thin and hard. Renly, smiling.
Eddard Stark, grim.
Any of them could claim to act in the king's name while the king lay sleeping. Not if she moved first. She called for the members of the small council. She sent for the high septon. She sent for the goldsmiths who kept the crown, and the guards who kept the doors, and the scribes who kept the records. She sent quietly for her father. And as the ravens flew, Cersei Lannister sat in her husband's chair and listened to the red keep creak and settle around her, like a beast adjusting itself before it pounced. Renly Baratheon did not pretend grief very well. He could perform sympathy at court with the ease of a man who had been raised among masks, but real grief sat on him awkwardly, like armor not fitted to his body. In the private solar he had claimed, he paced in a tight line from hearth to window, boot heels striking the rug, hands flexing and unclenching. "Is he dead?" he asked for the third time. Ser Loras Tyrell, too young to carry the weight he carried, too beautiful to belong to war, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. His face was serious in a way it rarely was when he looked at Renly. "No," Loras said. "Not yet." Renly let out a breath, half laugh, half curse. "Not yet," he echoed, as if God's delight in leaving doors half open. Loras watched him. "You are afraid." Renly's smile flashed, quick and brittle. "Of course I'm afraid. A wounded king is more dangerous than a dead one. Dead kings are simple. Wounded kings bleed into everything." He stopped at the window. Outside, King's Landing hunched beneath rain and smoke, rooftops slick, streets crawling. Beyond the city walls, the black line of the Kingswood blurred into mist. Somewhere out there, a boar rotted and became a story. "Cersei will move," Renly said. "She always does. She will crown Joffrey before Robert's blood dries." "Can she?" Loras asked, though he knew the answer in his bones. Gold and swords made many things possible. Renly turned, and for a moment the charm fell away, showing the hard boy beneath. "She will try," he said. "And if she succeeds, then what am I? A brother the new king does not need. An uncle the queen will not trust. A loose thread. She will cut me." Loras pushed off the wall. "You have friends," he said. Renly's eyes flicked to him, warm for a heartbeat. "Friends," he repeated. "Yes." He looked away again. "But friends can't stand against the law. Stannis is the law." Loras's brow furrowed. "Stannis Baratheon is on Dragonstone. And if he comes?" Renly asked softly. "If he comes to claim what he thinks is his, what then?" Loras hesitated. "Then you must decide what you want." Renly laughed without humor. "I want to live," he said. "It is astonishing how difficult that becomes when your family is full of kings." He went to the table where a map lay half unrolled. He tapped Dragonstone with 2 fingers. "Stannis Baratheon will not bend," he said. "Not to Cersei, not to Joffrey, not to me. He will come like a nail driven into wood. And if he arrives while Robert is asleep, he will take the hammer from the king's hand and swing it in his own name." "And if you stop him?" Loras asked. Renly looked up. His eyes were bright, hungry. "How?" he said, and it was not a question so much as a dare to the world. Loras's mouth tightened. "Highgarden," he said quietly. Renly's gaze held his, and the room seemed to draw a breath. Highgarden meant bread and banners and gold and the largest host in the realm. Highgarden meant Mace Tyrell's vanity and Olenna Tyrell's sharp mind. Highgarden meant Marjorie Tyrell, a girl with soft hands and ambitious eyes. Renly's smile returned, smoother now. "Yes," he said. "Highgarden." He turned back to the map. "If Robert dies, Cersei crowns her bastard and holds the throne with Lannister swords. If Stannis comes, he will demand justice and likely get a knife in return. If Robert lives, if he lives and wakes to find that the realm has already begun choosing." He cut himself off, lips pressing together. Loras stepped closer. "Then you must be the choice," he said. Renly looked at him, and for a moment the solar was warm despite the rain. Then Renly's face hardened again. "Send a rider," he said, "to your father, to your grandmother. Tell them the king is dying and the lions are moving. Tell them the realm will need a friendly hand at the tiller." Loras nodded once, crisp. "It will be done." Renly watched him go, then poured himself a cup of wine he did not drink. He stared at it, the red liquid catching firelight like blood. Robert had always laughed at prophecies, at omens. Renly did not laugh now. He thought of Stannis' face, stern as stone, and the way Stannis had looked at him as a boy, always measuring, always disapproving, as if Renly's very existence were an indulgence. He thought of Cersei's smile, sharp and sweet, and Joffrey's pale eyes. And he thought of Robert, huge and broken on a bed, breathing like a bellows that might stop at any moment. If the realm had learned anything from the last war, it was that a throne did not belong to the man who sat on it. It belonged to the man who could keep others from taking it. Renly set the cup down untouched and began writing letters. On Dragonstone, the wind never stopped arguing. It worried at the black stone towers and hissed through the narrow windows like a voice that would not be silenced. Stannis Baratheon stood on the ramparts and listened to it as if it were counsel. The raven's message was short. It did not waste ink on pleasantries. The king was wounded. The king might die. The queen was moving. Renly was afraid. The realm was restless. Stannis read it once, then again, then folded it so tightly the paper creased like skin. Davos Seaworth waited beside him with the patience of a man who had once waited on tides. His hands were rough and scarred, and the bones of his fingers ached in the cold. He did not speak until Stannis did. "They have gone to ground," Stannis said at last. His voice was flat. His eyes were on the sea where ships bobbed, waiting. Lannisters in the king's halls, lions in the corridors, and my brother, my foolish, smiling brother, scrabbling for allies as if alliances were stronger than law. Davos cleared his throat. "Renly Baratheon does not want to die," he said carefully. Stannis turned his head a fraction. "Neither do I," he said, "but I have never made that the measure of right." The wind snapped his cloak against his legs. Below, the narrow sea was a slate blade. Dragonstone's harbor stank of tar and fish and salt. Men moved on the docks like ants, loading barrels, tightening ropes, checking oars. It would be easy enough to sail. It would be easy enough to arrive at King's Landing and declare himself protector of the realm, acting in Robert's name until Robert recovered. Easy enough if no one resisted. Easy enough if there were no knives in the dark. Stannis had lived long enough to know there were always knives. "What of the king?" Davos asked. "Will he live?" Stannis's mouth tightened. "If the gods are just, he will," he said. Then, with a bitterness that tasted like rust, "But the gods have never consulted me on justice." He looked out over the sea, and in his mind he saw King's Landing as it was. A city built on filth and lies, perched above a river like a drunk above a gutter. He saw the red keep, red stone and white towers, full of courtiers who smiled while they sharpened their teeth. He saw Robert in that bed, large and helpless, and he felt an old anger flare. Anger at Robert's carelessness, at Robert's indifference, at Robert's ability to stumble into crowns without effort while Stannis had stood in the rain and held Storm's End with starving men. He had never envied Robert's charm. He had envied Robert's freedom to be weak and still be loved. Stannis turned away from the sea. "Ready the ships," he said. Davos's eyebrows rose slightly. "All of them." "Enough," Stannis said. "I will not crawl into that city like a thief. I will arrive as what I am." "And what are you?" Davos asked, though there was no mockery in it. Stannis's eyes were hard. "The king's brother," he said. "The king's heir, until he names another. Ah, Davos nodded slowly. "There will be trouble," he said. "There is always trouble," Stannis replied. He started down the steps, boots striking stone. "Send word to the captains, and send word to the maester more ravens, to Lord Eddard Stark, to Renly Baratheon, To every lord who can read, let them know I am coming. Davos followed, his shorter steps quickening. If Robert Baratheon dies on his bed, he began, then stopped, as if the words were too sharp to speak aloud. Stannis did not stop walking. If he dies, he said, then I will do what must be done. The wind howled through a narrow archway, and for a moment it sounded almost like laughter. Deep within Dragonstone, candles burned before an idol carved of twisted wood, its face half shadow and half flame. A woman's voice sang softly in a language Davos did not know. Stannis did not look toward it. Not yet. He had a city to claim. When the small council gathered, it did so with the careful haste of men who knew their world was shifting under their feet. They came with faces composed into the appropriate shapes. Sorrow, concern, loyalty. Each face was a mask. Some were better made than others. Cersei sat at the head of the table, not in the king's chair. She had not dared that, not yet, but close enough that the space between her and power was only a reach of her hand. Her hair was braided and pinned as if for mourning, though her gown was not black. Cersei Lannister did not believe in dressing like defeat. Grand Maester Pycelle fussed with parchments, his chain clinking. Peter Baelish lounged as if he had wandered in by mistake, all ease and polished charm. Varys stood with his hands folded, his expression an eternal sympathy that asked for nothing and offered less. Ser Barristan Selmy stood behind the empty chair Robert should have filled, rigid in white and gold, his face a stone. Ned took his place at the table and felt every eye on him, weighing him. "My lords," Cersei began, voice smooth, "the king is gravely injured. The gods grant he recovers. Until then, the realm must be governed." Ned's fingers tightened on the table edge. "I govern," he said. "I am hand." Cersei's gaze slid to him. "You are hand by the king's grace," she said softly. "And the king cannot speak his grace at present." The words were a knife wrapped in silk. Ned felt its edge. He looked to Barristan, but Barristan's eyes were fixed on the far wall, as if staring at dragons on tapestry rather than the queen's coup unfolding. "We must consider a regency," Pycelle piped, eager, "to act in his grace's stead. Such things are customary in times of—" "Customary?" Peter Baelish murmured, as if tasting the word. "Convenient, too?" Ned's gaze snapped to him. "This is no game," he said. Peter's smile widened. "Everything is a game, Lord Eddard Stark," he said, lightly, as if offering advice to a child. "The only question is whether you know the rules." Cersei leaned forward slightly. "The king has sons," she said. "A regent could rule in King Joffrey's name, should the worst occur." "The worst has not occurred," Ned said sharply. "The king lives. And yet," Varys murmured gently, "the realm must be reassured. The small folk are anxious." Ned looked at Varys, seeing for an instant the calculation beneath the softness. "Anxiety can be eased by truth," he said. "Truth," Cersei repeated, and her green eyes glittered. "Yes, let us speak of truth, Lord Stark." The room seemed to tighten. Ned heard the candle wicks crackle. Outside, rain tapped at the windows like impatient fingers. Cersei's voice remained calm. "You came to King's Landing preaching honor," she said. "You meddled in matters you do not understand. My husband lies bleeding, and already you would seize control, as if the realm were yours." Ned's jaw clenched. "I would keep the realm from falling into the hands of—" "Of whom?" Cersei asked. "Of a mother protecting her children? Of a queen defending her husband's legacy." Ned could feel the trap. If he spoke openly of Joffrey's parentage here, he would do it surrounded by Cersei's allies, in a room full of ears that belonged to gold. But if he did not, he would be letting her build her lies into law. He looked to Barristan. "Ser Barristan," he said, "the king named me hand. The king trusted me. Will you see his will twisted while he sleeps?" Barristan's eyes finally moved. For a heartbeat, something like sorrow showed there. "My duty is to the king," he said, voice low. "Then do your duty," Ned said. Barristan's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, then relaxed. "I will guard him," he said. "I will not play at councils." Cersei's smile was small and satisfied. "Guard him? Yes. Guard him so he cannot speak." Ned felt anger rise, hot and useless. He forced it down. "There will be no regency declared without the king's word," he said. "And you will not place your son on the throne while the king still breathes." Cersei's eyes narrowed. "You presume much." "I presume nothing," Ned said. "I uphold the law." "Law?" Peter Baelish murmured again, like a man watching a coin spin. Such a sharp little word. The door opened before the argument could harden further. A guard entered and knelt. "My lords," he said, "a raven from Dragonstone." At the word, the room shifted like a living thing. Stannis Baratheon's name was not spoken, but it hung in the air. Cersei held out her hand. The guard hesitated, then stepped forward and gave the letter to her. She broke the seal with a practiced motion and read, eyes moving quickly. Her mouth tightened. "He is coming," she said, voice clipped. Ned's stomach sank. Stannis in the capital could mean salvation or fire. "And Renly?" Varys asked softly. "Has he been informed?" Cersei's eyes flicked, sharp. "Renly has his own informers," she said. "As do we all." Ned sat back, mind racing. 3 Baratheons in one city, 1 wounded, 2 ambitious, and a queen with a lion's pride. The table between them suddenly felt like the edge of a battlefield. Outside, the rain fell harder, as if the sky itself were leaning in to listen. Janos Slint smelled like old wool and sweat and nervous ambition. He tried to hide it beneath a swagger that did not fit him, as if he had borrowed it from a taller man and hoped no one would notice. His gold cloak was immaculate, but his hands kept finding the edge of his belt and gripping. Cersei watched him with the cool interest she might have given a dog being judged for purchase. Beside her, Peter Baelish stood with a small wooden chest at his feet, its iron latch shining in torchlight. "My men keep order," Janos said, voice too loud in the small stone room. "The city watch answers to the king." "The king is indisposed," Cersei said, "and order is fragile." Janos licked his lips. His eyes flicked to the chest, then away, pretending it held no power. Peter Baelish crouched and opened the latch. The chest lid lifted with a soft creak. Inside, gold caught the torchlight and threw it back in warm flashes. Dragons, stags, lions. Coins from across the realm, pressed into one shimmering heap. It was the soundless argument of wealth. Janos's throat bobbed. "That's a fair bit," he managed. "A fair bit," Peter agreed pleasantly. "For a fair man." Cersei leaned forward slightly. "You will place your men where I tell you," she said. "In the gates, in the corridors, outside the king's chambers." Janos blinked. "Outside the king's, your grace, that's the Kingsguard's place." "The Kingsguard guards the king," Cersei said. "They do not guard the doors that lead to him. Doors are your business." Janos hesitated. "Lord Eddard Stark is hand," he said carefully. He might what?" Cersei's voice was soft, but it carried steel. "Might object? Might drag you to the council table and speak to you of honor." Janos's face flushed. He was not a brave man. He was not a clever man. But he knew which way the wind blew when gold was held out like bait. Peter lifted a handful of coins, letting them run through his fingers in a soft, musical cascade. "This is only a portion," he said. "There will be more. Title, perhaps. Lands. A lordship. Men like to be remembered, don't they, Commander?" Janos swallowed. I keep the peace," he repeated weakly. Cersei's eyes narrowed. "You will keep my peace," she said. "The king's peace, and you will do it quietly. If Lord Stark tries to enter the king's chambers with more men than courtesy requires, your gold cloaks will misplace him." Janos stiffened, alarm sharpening his features. "Misplace the hand?" Cersei smiled faintly. "Accidents happen," she said. "Even to hands. Especially to hands." Silence held for a moment, filled only by the hiss of torches. Janos's eyes went to the gold again. He reached toward it as if drawn. "And if the king wakes?" he asked, almost pleading. Cersei's smile did not change. "Then you will still have kept order," she said. "And you will still be rewarded. The king likes loyalty." Janos hesitated another heartbeat, then dipped his head. "As you command, your Grak." "Eh." Peter Baelish closed the chest and slid it toward him. Janos's hands went to it quickly, possessive. For a moment, he looked like a starving man who had been handed bread. When Janos left, Cersei remained still, listening to his footsteps fade. Peter straightened, dusting off his knees. "A simple man," he said. "Simple men are so useful." "They are disposable," Cersei replied. Peter's smile was sharp. "Sometimes," he said, "and sometimes they become inconveniently powerful." Cersei's eyes flicked to him. "Do not confuse yourself with him," she said. Peter's expression remained pleasant, but something cold moved behind it. "I would never," he said. Cersei turned away. In the corridor outside, the Red Keep stones seemed to hold their breath. With the city watch in her hand, she could shape the city's heartbeat. She could close the gates, open them, flood streets with gold cloaks, choke off men who believed themselves untouchable. All she needed now was time. And time, in a bedchamber scented with poppy and blood, was something a sleeping king could be made to give. Night came early with the rain. The Red Keep's halls grew dim, torchlight painting everything in wavering gold and shadow. The king's chamber was a little world of its own. Curtains drawn, candles clustered, the air thick with sweetness and rot. The smell of poppy clung to the tongue like honey with an aftertaste of dust. Ned sat by the bed until his back ached and his eyes burned. He had sent men, his own men, to watch the doors, but they were stopped by gold cloaks long before they reached the king's corridor. He had argued, he had demanded, he had been met with smooth refusals and polite smiles. Cersei's web was tightening. Robert lay still, his breath ragged. He had not opened his eyes since the litter carried him in. Pycelle had stitched the wound with hands that trembled too much for Ned's comfort. The stitches held, but the fever did not break. Sweat slicked Robert's brow and ran into his beard. His hands twitched sometimes, as if reaching for something only he could see. Ned held one of those hands now. It was large enough to swallow his own, even weak as it was. He remembered that hand on his shoulder at Renly, Robert laughing as if the world were endless. He remembered the hammer in it, the way Robert had swung without hesitation, the way men had died. Now the hand was limp, reduced to flesh. Pycelle moved about the room, murmuring to himself, mixing another draft. "He needs rest," he said for the 10th time. "The milk will ease his pain." "It will keep him asleep," Ned said. Pycelle's watery eyes blinked. "Sleep is healing, my lord." "So is truth," Ned replied. Barristan stood at the foot of the bed like a carved figure, white cloak falling in straight lines. His eyes tracked every movement in the room. Ned could feel the old knight's tension, restrained by duty and uncertainty. "Ser Barristan," Ned said quietly. "If the queen orders, the king kept drugged." Barristan's jaw tightened. "The queen orders many things," he said. "My duty is to the king." "Then help me protect him," Ned said, and there was something raw in his voice, a plea he would have hated to hear himself make. Not just his body, his crown. Barristan's eyes flickered to Pycelle, then to the door, where a shadow lingered in the crack of it. Cersei watching, silent. "I will not draw steel on the queen," Barristan said at last, voice low. Ned's grip tightened on Robert's hand. "You may not have to," he said, "if Robert wakes." He leaned closer to Robert's ear again, voice a whisper that tried to cut through poppy dreams. "Robert," he murmured, "wake. The lions are at your throat." Robert's lips moved. A sound came out, not a word, more a breath shaped by pain. His fingers twitched, curling faintly around Ned's. Ned felt a flicker of hope so sharp it hurt. Pycelle stepped closer with the cup. "Time for another draft," he said. He lifted Robert's head gently, too gently, as if afraid of disturbing the king's sleep. "There now, just a sip." Ned's hand hot out and caught Pycelle's wrist. "No," he said. Pycelle froze, scandalized. "Lord Stark, this is the king," Ned said. "Not a babe you can lull. He needs to wake. He needs to speak." Pycelle's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes flicked, nervous, toward the door. Cersei's shadow moved. She stepped into the room, candlelight catching her hair. She looked at Ned's hand on Pycelle's wrist and smiled. "How touching," she said softly. "You clutch at old men now, Lord Stark." Ned released Pycelle slowly. "Your Grace," he said, stiff. Cersei's gaze went to Robert, then back to Ned. "You sit here like a grieving widow," she said. "It is almost endearing." "I sit here because the king needs allies," Ned said. "The king has a wife," Cersei replied. Ned's voice dropped. "He has enemies too." For a moment, something like anger flashed in Cersei's eyes. Then it smoothed away. "Grand Maester," she said, "give him the draft. The king is in pain." Ned looked at Barristan. The old knight did not move. Ned wanted to snatch the cup and fling it at the wall. He wanted to drag Cersei from the room and shout the truth so loudly the whole keep would hear. But the truth was not a sword. It was a fragile thing. If he wielded it wrongly, it would break, and Cersei would smile and call it a northern lie. Pycelle lifted the cup again. Robert's lips parted. The milk touched them. Robert swallowed once, reflex more than choice. Ned's throat tightened. He felt as if he were watching a man drown slowly while everyone insisted the water was comfort. Cersei watched him, her expression serene. "You should rest, Lord Stark," she said. "You look exhausted. The king will not wake sooner for your staring." Ned rose slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "I will not abandon him," he said. Cersei's smile was thin. "No," she agreed. "You will not. That is why you are so easy to predict." When Ned left the chamber, the corridor outside felt colder. Gold cloaks stood at attention. Lannister guards watched him pass. The keep stones seemed to whisper with every step. Behind him, in that dim room, Robert Baratheon slept on, held down by poppy and politics. And in the dark corners of the castle, men and women began to decide what would be done with a king who could not say no. Dawn came pale and reluctant, a smear of light behind clouds. The harbor stank as it always did, fish guts, tar, and human waste, but the smell was sharpened now by tension. Men clustered on docks and stared out at the mouth of Blackwater Bay as if expecting a monster to rise. Ships emerged instead, dark shapes sliding through mist. Their sails were furled, oars pulling in steady rhythm, the beat of them like a heart that refused to be ignored. The banners at their prows snapped in the wind. The crowned stag of House Baratheon, stark against the gray morning. Whispers ran along the piers. Stannis, Stannis Baratheon, the king's brother, the grim one, the lawful one, the one who did not smile. Gold cloaks moved toward the docks in a loose line, boots splashing through puddles. Janos Slynt rode at their front. His face set into an expression he likely believed looked stern. He did not look pleased to see the ships. He looked like a man realizing he had sold his loyalty too cheaply. The first ship's gangplank thudded down onto wet boards. Soldiers stepped onto the dock, armor dark, cloaks damp with sea spray. They moved with discipline, eyes forward, hands near hilts. Davos Seaworth followed, his plainness almost shocking among men dressed for war. Behind him came Stannis Baratheon. Stannis wore black and red, the colors of his house made severe rather than bright. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were pale and unblinking, taking in the city as if it were a problem to be solved. The mist dampened his beard and hair, but he did not seem to feel the cold. He stepped onto the dock and did not pause. It was as if the ground itself owed him a path. Janos Slynt dismounted quickly, gold cloak flaring. He approached with a stiff bow. "Lord Stannis," he said, voice pitched carefully. "Welcome to King's Landing." Stannis did not return the greeting. "I am here to see my brother," he said. "Make way." Janos's mouth tightened. "The king is resting," he said. "The queen is not my brother," Stannis said flatly. "Move." Around them, small folk stared from a distance, eyes wide. Some spat for luck. Some crossed themselves. A few cheered, uncertainly, as if trying to guess which sound would keep them safe. Janos hesitated just long enough for Stannis to notice the hesitation. Stannis's gaze sharpened. "You are commander of the City Watch?" he asked. "Yes, my lord," Janos said. "And you stand between a brother and his king," Stannis said. It was not a question. It was a sentence, and in it was condemnation. Janos's throat bobbed. "Orders," he said weakly. "From the queen." Stannis stepped closer. He did not raise his voice, and that made it worse. "Your orders are to keep the peace of the king," he said. "The king's, not the queen's, not the Lannisters. Tell your men to move, or I will move them myself." Janos's eyes flicked to Stannis's soldiers, then to his own gold cloaks. Numbers mattered, and Janos knew his men. They would fight for Coy. But coin was not the same as conviction. Stannis Baratheon looked like conviction made flesh. Janos raised a hand. "Stand aside," he barked, and the gold cloaks shifted reluctantly, parting. Stannis walked through them without looking back. As he moved up the street from the harbor toward the hill where the Red Keep rose, the city seemed to watch him. Women leaned out of windows. Boys ran alongside until shouted away. Men in taverns stopped drinking to stare. The air was thick with rumor, and rumor clung to Stannis like mist. Davos kept pace, glancing at faces, noting alley mouths, listening for the sound of trouble. "They're watching you," he murmured. "Let them," Stannis said. When they reached the gates of the Red Keep, the guards there stiffened, uncertain. Stannis did not wait to be challenged. He announced himself, and the gates opened. Not wide, not welcoming, but open enough. Inside, the castle's courtyards were slick with rain. The walls loomed red and wet. Stannis looked up at them, at the towers that had once been a Targaryen's fortress and then Robert's prize. He did not smile. He did not pause to admire. He only said, "Take me to the king." And behind him, King's Landing inhaled, bracing for what would come when two Baratheon brothers stood on the same ground while lions prowled in the dark. The night Stannis reached the Red Keep, the air in Robert's chamber felt different. Ned could not have named why at first. The candles burned lower, their flames twitching at drafts that were not there. The shadows in the corners seemed to press closer, as if the room had grown smaller around the bed. Ned had returned despite Cersei's sneers and the gold cloaks at the door. He had pushed, argued, threatened, and at last been allowed to sit again. Alone, he suspected, because alone he could be managed. Barristan was there, silent and rigid, a white pillar of duty. Pycelle hovered with another cup, another soothing lie. And then the door had opened, and Stannis Baratheon had entered without ceremony. He did not bow. He did not ask permission. He walked to the foot of the bed and stopped, staring down at his brother as if measuring the distance between what Robert had been and what he had become. For a long moment no one spoke. Even Pycelle's chain seemed to stop clinking. Stannis's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Is he conscious?" "No," Ned said. "Not since the hunt." Stannis's eyes flicked to the cup in Pycelle's hands. "What is that?" Pycelle swallowed. "Milk of the poppy, my lord. For the king's pain." Stannis's mouth tightened. "Pain keeps a man awake," he said. "Sleep makes him easy." Pycelle's hands trembled, and a drop of the pale liquid slid down the cup's side. Cersei was in the room too, though she had not announced herself. She stood near the curtains, half in shadow, her green gown catching candlelight like a blade catching sun. She watched Stannis with a look that was almost amusement. "Brother," she said, and her voice was velvet. "How kind of you to come." Stannis did not look at her. "Your kindness is not required," he said, eyes still on Robert. Cersei's smile sharpened. "You always were ungracious." "And you," Stannis said at last, turning his head slightly, "always were false." The words hung in the air. Ned felt the room tighten like a fist. Cersei's eyes glittered. "Careful," she said softly. "I am still queen." Stannis's gaze was ice. "You are a Lannister," he said, "and my brother lies bleeding while you count the hours." Ned's heart hammered. He watched Cersei's face, searching for cracks. Her expression did not change, but her fingers curled slightly at her side. Baratheon shifted, hand moving a fraction toward his sword. Not in threat, perhaps in instinct, the way a man might reach for a railing when he felt a floor tilt. "Enough," Ned said, though his voice lacked authority in that room filled with crowns and claims. "The king needs peace. The king needs truth," Stannis said. At that, Cersei laughed softly. "Truth," she echoed. "How the Baratheons love that word when it suits them." Pycelle edged closer to the bed, cup raised. "If his grace could just give it to me," Stannis said. Pycelle froze. "My lord." Stannis held out his hand. It was not a request. Pycelle's eyes darted to Cersei. She did not nod. She did not forbid. She simply watched, weighing. Pycelle's hands shook as he offered the cup. Stannis took it. He looked at the pale liquid, then at Robert's face, slick with sweat, lips parted in shallow breath. For a heartbeat, Ned thought Stannis might fling the cup to the floor. Instead, Stannis set it down on the table with deliberate care. "No more," he said. Cersei's smile thinned. "You cannot give orders in my husband's chamber," she said. Stannis's eyes cut to her. "Watch me," he said. The silence after was absolute. Then Robert Baratheon made a sound. It was small, barely more than a shift of air. But all heads turned. Ned leaned forward, hand tightening around Robert's. Robert's fingers twitched, curling, not fully closing. His breath hitched. His eyelids fluttered, as if the weight of sleep had become suddenly unbearable. The room seemed to hold its breath with him. Robert's eyes snapped open. For a moment they were unfocused, glassy with fever. Then they found Ned's face, and something like recognition flickered. Painful, slow, real. His lips moved. "Ned," he rasped. Ned's throat tightened. "I'm here," he said, voice breaking despite himself. "I'm here." Robert blinked, eyes shifting. They found Stannis at the foot of the bed, black and red, stern as judgment. Confusion crossed Robert's face, then anger, quick as lightning. "Stannis," Robert croaked. What in seven hells?" He tried to sit up. Pain slammed into him. He gasped, face twisting. Ned pressed a hand to his shoulder, gentle. "Easy," he murmured. "Easy." Robert's eyes darted toward the curtains, toward the shadow where Cersei stood. He saw her. Something dark moved across his expression, like a storm cloud passing over the sun. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Even Cersei was still. Robert swallowed, his throat working. His voice came out rough, but there was steel in it, a king's iron dragged up from under fever. "Why?" he said, staring between Ned and Stannis and the shadows beyond them. "Are there so many damned guards at my door?" Ned felt the question land like the first stone of an avalanche. Stannis's face did not change. Cersei's expression remained controlled, but her eyes narrowed, sharp as a drawn knife. Robert Baratheon was awake, and the realm, which had already begun to move without him, suddenly had to reckon with a living king who could speak. Robert's eyes were open, and that alone made the room feel like a different place. The weight that had pressed on it for days, sleep and poppy and quiet plotting, shifted as if the bed itself had suddenly remembered it held a king. He tried to push himself upright again, stubborn as a bull. Pain slammed through him and stole the breath from his lungs. His hand flew to his side, fingers digging into bandages already damp. His teeth bared in something that might have been a grin if it wasn't so close to a snarl. 7 hells, he wheezed. It hurts. It should, Stannis said, and there was no softness in it. You were gored. Robert's head snapped toward the voice. For a heartbeat his gaze sharpened, the fever haze parting just enough for old irritation to show through. Don't stand there like a bloody septon, he rasped. Where's my wine? Gone, Eddard Stark said, firm, leaning in to keep Robert from tearing himself open. You're lucky to be alive. Robert blinked at him as if seeing him properly for the first time. Then his mouth twisted. Ned, he breathed. And for a moment there was something almost like relief. Ned, what's happened? He tried to swing his legs, and Eddard Stark pressed him back with a hand that was gentle but unyielding. Ser Barristan Selmy's boots scraped once as he shifted his stance, as if bracing for the room to break into violence. Grand Maester Pycelle hovered, pale and sweating, his cup now empty and useless, his eyes moving between queen and brothers like a trapped rat's. Cersei Lannister stepped forward, her voice a warm cloth laid over steel. You frightened us, she said. You were hurt terribly. The Grand Maester did all he could. You must rest. Robert's gaze slid to her. Whatever he saw there made his eyes narrow. Rest? He repeated, tasting the word like ash, his lips curled. You look very well for a woman who thought her husband dying. Cersei's smile held. I thought only of your comfort. Robert coughed, and the sound was wet. It hurt him. He could not hide that, but his eyes remained locked on hers. Comfort, he said again, hoarse. Aye. Stannis's voice cut through the tension like a saw. There are guards outside this chamber that do not answer to you, Robert, he said. You asked why. That is why. Robert dragged air, slow and heavy. What does that mean? He demanded. Who put guards at my door? Cersei answered quickly. The city watch maintains order, she said. There have been rumors. The people don't put gold cloaks in my hallways, Robert snapped. He turned his head, eyes flicking to Eddard Stark. Ned. Eddard Stark held his gaze. There are too many men in this castle who speak as if you're already dead, he said. And too many who benefit if you stay asleep. Robert's nostrils flared. He shifted, wincing, and his hand clenched the blanket like he meant to strangle it. And you? He rasped, eyes cutting back to Stannis. What are you doing here? Street. Stannis did not blink. I came because the realm is in danger, he said. Because you are incapable of ruling from a bed while lions creep through your halls. Robert barked a laugh that turned into a cough. Always so damn cheerful, he muttered. Then his expression hardened. Have you taken my castle? I have taken nothing, Stannis said. I have secured what is yours. Robert's gaze drifted, as if his mind were trying to map the gap between words and meaning. His brow furrowed. Secured, he repeated. Eddard Stark leaned closer, voice low. You have been asleep for days, he said. There were decisions made. Robert's eyes widened slightly. Decisions, he said, voice thick with disbelief. Without me. Cersei lifted her chin. The realm cannot wait, she said. Stannis's eyes flicked to her. It waited 15 years while he drank, he said coldly. It can wait an hour while he learns what has been done in his name. Robert's head turned slowly. His gaze took in Pycelle's trembling hands, Barristan's rigid posture, Eddard Stark's grim face. He saw, perhaps, what he had never wanted to see, that the throne did not sit idle when the king did. It was always being held by someone, if only for a moment. Get me... Robert began, then stopped to swallow down pain. Get me my counsel. Cersei's voice was soft as velvet. Not yet, she said. You are weak. Robert's eyes flared. The old storm rose in him, battered but alive. Weak? He rasped. I'll show you weak. He tried to move again, and his face whitened as the wound protested. He hissed through his teeth. Eddard Stark steadied him. Tomorrow, he said quickly, because he could see where Robert's pride was going to drag him. Let the stitches hold. Let the fever break. Tomorrow you can sit the throne. Robert glared at him like a man being told to surrender ground. Then, slowly, he nodded once, as if granting mercy. Tomorrow, he said. He looked at Stannis. You, he rasped. You'll be there. Stannis gave a shallow nod. All duty. I will. Robert's gaze flicked toward the curtains where Cersei stood. And you, he said, voice low, you will not keep me drugged like a milk-fed babe. Do you hear me? Cersei's smile tightened. I would never, she said. Robert's eyes narrowed. If I find you have, he whispered, I'll have your tongue. The words should have been a threat in jest, the kind Robert used to throw in feasting halls between laughter and drink. Here, spoken in the poppy-sweet air with blood still drying under bandages, it sounded like an oath. Stannis' face did not change. Eddard Stark felt the room tilt slightly, as if a ship had shifted course under them. Outside, somewhere deeper in the Red Keep, the bells began to toll again. Slower now, uncertain of what they were announcing. A king awake was not the same as a king whole, and King's Landing knew the difference. Renly Baratheon arrived in the throne room as if he owned the air, as if the red stone and the iron blades were merely a stage built for him. He moved with the easy grace of youth and beauty, and that ease was not carelessness. It was a weapon. Men smiled when he looked at them. Women watched him without hiding it. Even the guards seemed to straighten as he passed, as if wanting to be included in his notice. Ser Loras Tyrell walked at his side, white cloak traded for green and gold. His face composed in a knight's seriousness that did not quite hide the heat in his eyes when he looked at Renly. Behind them, courtiers clustered like birds, whispering. They had heard the rumor before the bells finished ringing. The king's eyes were open. Petyr Baelish and Varys stood near the foot of the Iron Throne, a few steps below where Robert Baratheon usually sprawled when he bothered to hold court. The throne sat empty now, its jagged silhouette cutting against the light like an accusation. Someone had draped a black cloth over part of it, a token mourning for a king not dead. The cloth looked absurd against the iron, as if trying to soften a blade. Renly approached with a smile that could have been genuine, if not for the quick dart of his eyes toward the empty seat. My lords, he said, voice carrying, has anyone thought to polish this dreadful thing? If we're meant to pretend it's comfortable, we might at least make it shine. Petyr's smile widened. Comfort has never been the point, he murmured. Only the appearance of it. Varys clasped his hands, expression gentle. Lord Renly, he said, what a blessing that his grace has awakened. Renly's brows lifted, the perfect portrait of pleasant surprise. Has he? He said, as if he had not spent the night pacing and sending men running. Truly. Varys' smile did not change. So the servants say, and the servants, in a castle like this, often no more than lords. Renly laughed softly. Then we are all in their debt, he said. His gaze slid over the gold cloaks lining the walls. Too many, not the casual guard of ceremony. Their faces were hard, their hands close to batons. Renly's smile remained, but something in his eyes sharpened. Janos, he called lightly, and the commander of the city watch stepped forward from the shadows with a stiff bow. My lord, Janos Slint said. His cheeks were ruddy, his posture too eager. Renly's tone was pleasant. Why are there so many of your men in the throne room? He asked, as if asking about weather. Have the tapestries grown teeth? Janos swallowed. Orders, he said. From the queen, Renly finished, smile sweet. Of course, everything is from the queen these days. A ripple of quiet laughter went through the courtiers. Janos flushed deeper, uncertain whether he had been mocked or praised. Renly stepped closer, lowering his voice as if confiding. Tell me, he murmured. If the king commands you to remove them, will you? Janos's eyes flick. A quick toward Petyr Baelish, then away. I serve the king, he said, and the words sounded rehearsed. Renly's smile widened. Splendid, he said. Then perhaps you might begin remembering what that feels like. He turned back toward the Iron Throne, gaze lingering on the black cloth. For a heartbeat his charm slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. Robert awake meant the easy path. Robert dying and leaving a vacant space had narrowed, but it had not closed. A wounded king could still be steered. A wounded king could still be surrounded. The throne room filled with whispers. Lords and ladies spoke behind hands. Some were relieved. Some were disappointed. The city had been preparing itself to choose, and now the choice was complicated. Ser Loras leaned close to Renly. "He is alive," he murmured, voice low enough that only Renly could hear. "That changes everything," Renly agreed softly, still smiling at the room. "And nothing." He lifted his chin and called louder to the gathered court. "Send word to my brother," he said, as if issuing a simple courtesy. "Tell his grace his youngest brother is delighted to hear he can still open his eyes. And tell him I will come to him at once." His tone was warm. His eyes were cold. In the shadows behind them, Varys watched with the faint look of a man listening to a song he already knew the ending of. Peter Baelish's smile did not reach his eyes. Above, the Iron Throne waited, empty and hungry, as if it knew that the moment a king rose from bed, the knives in the court only grew sharper. The corridor outside Robert's chambers became a bottleneck for ambition. Renly arrived first, boots clean despite the wet day, cloak clasped with a small stag of gold. He brought Ser Loras and 2 Baratheon guards, real Baratheon guards, men from Storm's End who had followed him south and still wore the look of wind-scarred coasts. He did not bring a crowd. Renly was too clever to look like a threat when the king could still speak. Stannis was already there, unmoving, a dark post planted in the stone. Davos Seaworth stood a pace behind him, hands folded, eyes alert. Gold cloaks lingered farther down the hall like a line of yellow teeth. 2 Lannister guards stood near the door as well, stiff and uncertain, caught between queen and king and brothers. Eddard Stark waited between them, feeling the corridor's narrowness like a noose. He had ordered his own men to watch the side passages, but they were scattered and outnumbered. The Red Keep stones belonged to those who had lived inside them longest. Renly's smile appeared as if summoned by Stannis' scowl. "Brother," he said brightly, how earnest you look. One would think you'd come to a funeral." Stannis' eyes did not soften. "Do not call me brother as if it makes you loyal," he said. Renly clasped his hands in mock innocence. "Loyalty is such a dull word," he said. "I prefer affection." "You prefer crowds," Stannis replied. "They clap when you speak." Renly laughed softly. "And you prefer silence," he said. "It doesn't argue with you." Eddard Stark stepped forward before the exchange could turn into something sharper. "The king is awake," he said. "He is weak. He will see you both, but not like this." "Like what?" Renly asked, tone mild. 2 brothers visiting their wounded king? How shocking. Stannis' gaze cut past Eddard Stark to the door. "How long has she been in there?" he asked. Renly's smile thinned. "Cersei Lannister never leaves a battlefield," he said lightly, "even when it's a bedchamber." Stannis took a step, and the corridor seemed to contract. "She will be removed," he said. Renly's brows lifted. "By you?" he asked. "How heroic." Eddard Stark felt the tension in the guards, the minute shifts of weight, hands edging toward hilts. A spark here would ignite the keep. "The king will decide," Eddard Stark said sharply. "Not you, not Renly, not the queen. The king." Stannis' mouth tightened. Renly's smile returned, smoother. "Of course," Renly said. "The king decides. He always has." But Eddard Stark heard the lie in it. Everyone had been deciding in Robert's stead for days. Now they would try to claim those decisions had been made for Robert, not against him. The door opened. Ser Barristan Selmy stepped out, white cloak catching torchlight. His face was carved from weariness and duty. He looked at Stannis and Renly both as if weighing them. "His grace will see you," Barristan said. "One at a time." Renly's smile brightened. "How sensible," he said. He glanced at Stannis as if inviting him to go first. Stannis did not move. "I was here," he said. Renly shrugged lightly. "Then do go in," he said. "Try not to frighten him back into sleep." Stannis ignored him and stepped past Barristan into the chamber. As the door closed behind him, Renly leaned closer to Eddard Stark, his voice soft. "Ned," he murmured, as if confiding in an old friend. "If Robert lives, he will lash out. He will want to hit something. He always does. Help him choose what to hit." Eddard Stark's eyes narrowed. "I will help him do what is right," he said. Renly's smile was gentle. "Of course," he said, "and if right happens to align with my interests, we will both be very pleased." He straightened, returning to courtly ease, and waited as if waiting for a performance to end. Within the chamber, Stannis would speak. He would speak of law and duty and danger. He would speak of what he had done in Robert's name while Robert could not object. Eddard Stark stood in the corridor and listened to the muffled sound of voices through thick wood, feeling the Red Keep's stones press in. The war was not out in fields yet. It was here, in passages too narrow for armies, fought with words and guards, and who stood nearest the door. When Stannis spoke to Robert alone as much as any king was ever alone in his own chamber, he did not waste breath on comfort. "You have been absent," he said. Robert's eyes narrowed. "I was gored by a boar," he rasped, as if reminding Stannis of a fact too simple to miss. "Did you come to scold me for bleeding?" Stannis's gaze was flint. "I came because while you slept, the Queen began to seize control of your house," he said. "She put Lannister men in your corridors. She bought the city watch. She prepared to crown her son without your word." Cersei's chin lifted sharply. "My son," she said, each syllable measured. "The king's son." Robert's eyes flicked to her, then back to Stannis. "Enough," he growled, voice weak but warning. "I'm not in the mood for—" "You are never in the mood for anything that matters," Stannis cut in, and the bluntness of it made even Pycelle flinch. "That is why we are here." Robert stared at him, stunned for a heartbeat. Then color surged into him, fury rising like heat. He tried to push himself up, as if rage could stitch his wound closed. Eddard Stark's hand came to his shoulder again. "Steady. You think you can talk to me like that?" Robert rasped. Stannis did not blink. "I have always spoken to you like that," he said. "You simply never listened." Robert's breath hitched. Pain pulled at his ribs. He hissed and clutched at the blanket, knuckles white. "What have you done?" he demanded. "What have you two done while I lay here?" Stannis's gaze flicked, briefly, toward the door, as if acknowledging Renly waiting beyond. "We acted," he said. "We issued orders in your name to keep your crown from being stolen. We placed Baratheon men at key points in the keep. We secured the harbor. We ensured the royal seal could not be used against you." Robert's eyes widened. "You used my seal," he said slowly, disbelief thickening into rage. "You signed in my name." "To prevent her from signing in your name," Stannis replied, nodding towards Cersei without looking at her. Cersei's smile was sharp. "You mean to paint yourself as a savior," she said. "How noble. A brother who comes late to the capital to steal power and call it protection." Stannis's eyes finally turned to her, cold and direct. "I did not come late," he said. "I left because your husband would not see what you were." Robert slammed his fist weakly against the bed, the sound a dull thud. "Enough!" he roared, and the roar ended in a cough that shook his whole body. He spat a thin smear of blood into the blanket and cursed.
Eddard Stark leaned in.
"Robert," he said quietly. "Breathe." Robert glared at him, then dragged air in through his nose like a bull, forcing himself to endure. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more dangerous. "You have been playing king," he said to Stannis, each word heavy. "You and Renly." Stannis's jaw tightened. "We have been acting as regents," he said, "until you recover." I never named a regent, Robert said. You never name anything? Stannis replied, and though his voice remained controlled, there was something raw beneath it, old resentment brought to the surface. You leave it to others. You drink and hunt and whore, and then you wake surprised when the realm has moved without you. Robert's eyes flared. For a heartbeat, the young man who had smashed Rhaegar's chest seemed to flicker behind the older one, the War King rising in the broken body. You think I don't know what you want? He hissed. You want my chair. Stannis's face remained hard. I want the law obeyed, he said. If you die, I'm not dead, Robert snarled. Stannis's eyes did not soften. If you die, he continued, the throne passes to your heir. Cersei's voice was sweet. Joffrey, she said. Stannis's mouth tightened. He did not say the words he carried like a stone in his throat. Not yet, not with Cersei listening, not with Robert still fevered and raw. He said only, the rightful heir. Robert's gaze flicked between them. You talk like I'm already a corpse, he growled. I'm awake. I'm king. You will put my seal back in my hand, and you will remove your men from my doors. Both of you. Stannis held his gaze. Your doors are watched because your enemies are close, he said. If you insist on tearing down every barrier, do not blame me when knives find you. Robert's lips curled. Knives don't frighten me, he said, though pain had him shaking. They should, Stannis replied, and for the first time there was something almost like anger that wasn't merely cold. They should, because this is not the Trident and you are not 20. You cannot win this war by swinging a hammer. Robert's breath rasped. He stared at Stannis for a long moment, and Eddard Stark could see the strain, the king's pride wrestling with the truth of his broken body. At last Robert's gaze slid away, toward Eddard Stark. Tomorrow, he said hoarsely, I will sit the throne.
Eddard Stark nodded.
Tomorrow, he agreed. Stannis's jaw clenched. Then tomorrow, he said, you will hear what we have discovered. Robert's eyes narrowed again. Discovered, he repeated. Stannis's gaze held his, unyielding. About your house, he said. Before Robert could demand more, Stannis turned and strode to the door. He did not bow to Cersei. He did not offer Robert comfort. He left the chamber like a man leaving a courtroom, judgment already decided. When the door closed behind him, Cersei's voice slid into the silence. He poisons you against your own blood, she said softly. Robert turned his head toward her, eyes heavy with fever and suspicion. And you, he rasped, would never poison anything. Cersei's smile did not reach her eyes. Eddard Stark felt the air thicken, and in it he heard the quiet truth. Robert Baratheon might be awake, but he was still surrounded. And everyone in that room was choosing what to do with the hours his wounds would buy them. Robert did not wait for tomorrow. It began with a muttered curse, a demand for boots, a refusal to lie like a fattened pig while other men wore his crown. Eddard Stark argued, quietly, urgently, with all the stubborn care of an old friend, and Robert listened for a heartbeat, then spat the words that had always ended arguments in war camps. Enough! He could not walk far. The first attempt to swing his legs from the bed left him white-faced and shaking. His wound screamed. The room swam. For a moment Eddard Stark thought he might faint and never wake again. But Robert's pride was a chain around his throat, and he would rather die dragging it than live without it. So they brought a heavy chair, carved oak with iron fittings, a thing made for old lords who could no longer climb stairs. Robert sneered at it, then grimaced and allowed himself to be lowered into it with clenched teeth. His hands gripped the arms so hard the knuckles whitened. Carry me, he commanded, voice rough. To the throne. Ser Barristan Selmy's face tightened, but he did not argue. He called guards, men who still wore the stag on their breast, not lions, and they lifted the chair with care. Robert's head jerked once at the movement. Pain flashed across his features. He swallowed it down like bitter ale. Eddard Stark walked beside him, one hand hovering, ready to steady him if the chair jolted. Stannis followed behind, silent, eyes sharp. watching the corridors like a man expecting assassins from every tapestry. Davos Seaworth trailed Stannis, plain as a shadow, gaze darting to doors and corners. They moved through the Red Keep, and it was as if the castle itself had been waiting for this moment. Doors opened, servants froze, courtiers pressed against walls, eyes wide. Whispers erupted and died as Robert passed, whispers that sounded like prayers and gossip mixed together. "He lives," someone breathed, and the words ran ahead of them like wildfire. Robert's face was set in a grim mask of determination. Sweat clung to his brow. His lips were pale. Every breath sounded like it scraped his ribs. But his eyes were awake, and in them was that old, dangerous thing, the certainty that the world should move when he spoke. They reached a narrow stair, and the guards strained, lifting higher, chair tilting slightly. Robert's teeth bared. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so close to a groan. "Faster," he rasped, as if ordering a charge.
Eddard Stark leaned closer.
"Robert," he murmured, "if you tear the stitches." Robert's head snapped toward him. "If I stay in bed," he hissed, "they'll tear the realm." Eddard Stark had no answer. He could only walk and pray the king's stubbornness did not kill him. When they reached the great doors of the throne room, the guards paused. The doors loomed, carved and heavy, the threshold between private weakness and public power. Robert stared at them as if they were a gate he meant to smash. "Open," he said. The doors swung inward. Inside, the throne room was crowded. Not full court, but enough to feel the eyes. Gold cloaks lined the walls, too many still, but their posture shifted when they saw Robert. Some straightened, some swallowed. A murmur rolled through the hall like wind through dry grass. At the far end, the Iron Throne rose, black and jagged, a mountain of melted swords. The black cloth still lay draped over part of it, ridiculous against the iron teeth. Robert's gaze fixed on it. Something like hatred crossed his face. "Remove that," he rasped. A servant rushed forward, hands trembling, and pulled the cloth away. It fell to the floor like a discarded shroud. The guards carried Robert forward. Each step echoed. Robert's breathing grew louder. Eddard Stark watched his face, waiting for him to falter. He did not. At the foot of the dais, the guards hesitated. The steps were steep. The Iron Throne was not made for weak men. Robert looked at it, then at the men holding him. "Up," he growled. They carried him up the steps with agonizing care. Robert's jaw clenched so hard his teeth creaked. His hands dug into the chair arms until the wood groaned. When they reached the top, they lowered him onto the Iron Throne itself. The first touch of cold iron against his back drew a sharp inhale. The blades did not cut him. There were ways to sit if you knew them, but the throne's discomfort was legendary for a reason. It reminded every king that comfort was not owed. Robert's hands gripped the arms of the throne, and for a heartbeat he looked almost like the man who had claimed it, young and laughing in armor. Then the pain returned, and the illusion cracked. Still, he sat. He looked out at the gathered faces. "I am alive," he said, voice hoarse but carrying in the hall. "And I am king." The words rolled through the room, relief in some, disappointment in others, fear in many. "Any man who has issued orders in my name without my leave," Robert continued, eyes hard, "will explain himself to me. Any man who has placed guards in my halls to keep me from my own doors will explain himself to me. Any man who thinks my crown is his because I slept." He paused, swallowing down pain, then leaned forward slightly, eyes blazing. "Will learn what it means to wake a stag." Eddard Stark stood below the dais, watching the court react. He saw Peter Baelish smile faintly, as if delighted. He saw Varys's eyes gleam with something unreadable. He saw Cersei Lannister at the edge of the hall, her expression calm, hands clasped, a queen in green watching her husband announce himself like a challenge. And he saw Stannis Baratheon standing in the shadows, face unmoving, as if Robert's return to the throne was not the end of a crisis but the beginning of the real one. They moved Robert back to a smaller solar after the throne room, away from the eyes and whispers and the hungry echo of the hall. The exertion had left him trembling, his skin damp, his breath ragged. He refused milk of the poppy. He refused help beyond what he could not physically deny. He refused, most of all, to look like a man whose crown could be borrowed. Eddard Stark brought the book like a weapon wrapped in paper. The lineages and histories of the great houses lay on the table between them, thick and heavy, smelling of old parchment and dust. Its pages were marked with scraps of cloth where Jon Arryn and Stannis Baratheon had once searched for proof. Robert sat in a chair near the hearth, not the Iron Throne now, just carved wood, and it seemed to offend him. He held a cup of watered wine with clenched fingers, as if the cup might betray him. His face was lined with pain and fury and lingering fever. Stannis stood across from him like a judge who had waited years to deliver sentence. "Tell him," Eddard Stark said quietly, because if he waited for courage, he would wait until the world burned. Stannis's eyes did not move from Robert. "Jon Arryn died because he learned the truth," he said. Robert snorted. "Jon Arryn died because he was old," he rasped. "Or because Lisa poisoned him with her tears. Everyone dies." "Not like that," Stannis said. "He was murdered." Robert's eyes narrowed. "By who?" Stannis did not glance at Eddard Stark. He did not soften the blow. "By the Lannisters," he said. "By your queen." The words hung. The fire popped softly, sending a small ember up. Rain tapped at the window. Robert's face reddened. "You accuse my wife in my own castle," he growled. "You always hated her." "I have no use for hatred," Stannis said. "Only fact." Eddard Stark opened the book and turned it so Robert could see. The pages were filled with inked names. Baratheon, Durrandon, Targaryen, lines of marriage and issue and hair color recorded like a ledger. "Look," Eddard Stark said. Robert's eyes flicked down reluctantly. "What am I meant to see?" he asked, irritation masking something else. Unease.
Eddard Stark's finger tapped a passage.
"Every marriage between Baratheon and Lannister recorded here," he said. "Every child born. In every case, the children take the Baratheon look. Black hair, blue eyes. The seed is strong." Robert's jaw clenched. "A book," he said, dismissive. "Ink. Old men's scribbles." Stannis's voice was flat. "Look at your bastards," he said. The word hit like a slap. Robert's eyes flashed. "Mind your tongue," he snarled. Stannis did not flinch. "Maya Stone in the Vale," he continued, relentless. "Gendry in the city, the smith's boy. Edric Storm at Storm's End. All black-haired. All yours." Robert's breath grew loud. For a moment Eddard Stark thought he might lunge despite his wounds. His hands tightened on the chair arms. "You came here to shame me," he said hoarsely. "I came here to save the realm," Stannis replied. "Your sons are not yours." Silence. The words were simple, and yet they rearranged the room. Eddard Stark felt as if the floor had dropped an inch beneath him. Robert stared at Stannis as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue. His mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted to Eddard Stark, as if begging him to deny it. Eddard Stark did not. Robert's gaze hardened. "Say it again," he rasped. Stannis's eyes were ice. "Joffrey is not your blood," he said. "Nor Myrcella, nor Tommen." Robert's face went blank for a heartbeat, as if his mind refused to translate what he heard into meaning. Then color surged into him, dark and violent. He surged forward in his chair, pain forgotten for an instant, and his cup flew from his hand, smashing against the hearth stones. Watered wine splashed like blood. "You lying bitter," Robert began, voice cracking. Eddard Stark stepped in, hands raised slightly. "Robert," he said, urgent. "Hear him. Hear me." Robert's eyes were wild. "You?" he spat at Eddard Stark. "You too? You've always judged me. You think you can take my crown by telling me." "No," Eddard Stark said, voice hard with grief. "I swore to serve you. That is why I am telling you." Robert's chest heaved. Pain trembled through him. He swallowed, throat working. "My children," he whispered. And the whisper held something like shock that cut deeper than rage. Stannis's voice softened only in its certainty, not in its cruelty. "They are Jaime Lannisters," he said. "That is why Jon Arryn died. That is why I left the capital. That is why your queen rushed to secure the city watch. She knows the truth." Robert's gaze slid toward the rain-streaked window, unfocused. For a moment he looked far away, as if seeing not the room but the past. Cersei's smile at their wedding, her cold touch in their bed, the children with hair like spun gold. He swallowed again. His eyes returned, and the fury in them had changed. It was no longer the hot anger of a man insulted. It was the cold, murderous anger of a man robbed. "Bring her," Robert said softly.
Eddard Stark's stomach clenched.
"Robert, bring her," Robert repeated, voice low as thunder rolling over distant hills. "Bring Jaime Lannister. Bring the boy." Stannis's jaw tightened. "Now," he said, and it was not a suggestion. "While your voice still carries and her knives have not found your throat." Eddard Stark looked at Robert's face, at the pain, the rage, the grief, the wounded pride, and understood that a war had just begun in a small solar by a quiet fire. Not banners yet, not armies, but blood. Cersei felt the shift before the messenger reached her door. She had lived too long at court not to sense when the air turned. Servants moved faster. Guards spoke in lower voices. The Red Keep stones carried rumor like water through cracks. When the knock came, hard, urgent, she did not jump. Queens did not jump. She rose from the chair by the window and smoothed her gown as if preparing for a feast. Jaime Lannister was already there, in white cloak and gold armor. The Kingsguard's sun-bright plate made almost obscene in her green chambers. He had been restless all day, prowling like a caged lion, jaw tight. He watched her as she moved, and in his eyes she saw the same thing she felt: danger. The door opened without her permission. A guard stepped in, Baratheon colors on his breast. Behind him stood a gold cloak, sweating, and behind that, another Baratheon man with the hard look of Storm's End. "Your Grace," the guard said, stiff. "The king commands your presence." "Now." Cersei's mouth curved faintly. "The king," she said softly. "How miraculous." Jaime's hand went to his sword. "Who sent you?" he demanded, voice sharp. "The king," the guard repeated. His eyes flicked to Jaime's blade, then away. Cersei turned slowly, her gaze sweeping over her children. Joffrey stood near the hearth in rich red and gold, his face set in an angry scowl that did not hide uncertainty. Myrcella hovered behind a chair, wide-eyed, clutching the edge as if it could anchor her. Tommen clung to a nursemaid's skirts, peering out with frightened curiosity. Cersei's smile softened. For them, not for the men at her door. "Joffrey," she said, voice calm. "Come." Joffrey's chin lifted. "Why?" he demanded. "What is this?" Cersei stepped toward him and touched his cheek with the tips of her fingers. "Because your father has awakened," she said, "and he wishes to see you." Joffrey's eyes flashed. "He should come to me," he said. "I am." Jaime's hand clamped on his shoulder. "Not now," he hissed. Joffrey jerked away, anger rising. "Don't touch me," he snapped, then looked toward Cersei as if expecting her to punish Jaime for the familiarity. Cersei's gaze held him, steady, warning without words. She turned back to the guards. "Very well," she said. "We will go." Jaime stepped closer to her, voice low. "Cersei," he murmured, and for a moment the mask slipped, fear showing. "This is Stannis. This is Stark. They will." "I know," Cersei whispered back, and her voice was cold. "Do you think I have not known since Jon Arryn began sniffing like a dog? Since Stannis fled to Dragonstone?" Jaime's jaw clenched. "Then we should leave," he said. "Now, take the children, take ship. Go to Casterly Rock. And abandon the throne?" Cersei asked softly. Her eyes glittered. Never. Jaime's hand tightened on her arm. Cersei. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. If we run, we are guilty, she whispered. If we stand, we are queens and kings. Jaime stared at her. Frustration and devotion tangled in his expression. He had killed one king for less than what might be asked of him now. He did not flinch from blood. But this was different. This was family. This was fate. Outside the chamber, the corridor was crowded. Gold cloaks stood on one side, Baratheon guards on the other. Their eyes were wary, hands close to weapons. The tension in the air felt like a drawn bowstring. Cersei walked between them, head high. Jaime moved beside her, white cloak brushing the stone. Joffrey followed, stiff with pride, trying to look like a prince above fear. Myrcella and Tommen were kept close by their nursemaid, small figures swallowed by adult legs and murmurs. As they moved through the Red Keep, eyes followed them. Some courtiers watched with glee, some with pity, most with calculation. The queen and her children, summoned like common petitioners, marched through halls that had once belonged entirely to them. Cersei did not allow her pace to falter. She would not show fear to the castle. Fear was blood in the water, but inside, beneath the perfect calm, her mind was already moving, counting men, weighing doors, measuring who could be bought and who could be broken. Because if Robert Baratheon had woken, then the game had shifted, and Cersei Lannister did not intend to lose. The room they chose for the confrontation was not the throne room. Robert could not endure the climb again so soon, and Eddard Stark did not want the court's eyes on this. Some truths, once spoken in public, became weapons everyone could swing. They brought Cersei into a private chamber near the king's rooms, a place with a long table and a hearth and tall windows that looked out over rain-soaked courtyards. Torches burned in iron brackets. The air smelled of smoke and wet wool. Guards stood at the doors, Baratheon men and, at Stannis' insistence, a few of his own, hard-faced soldiers from Dragonstone. Ser Barristan Selmy stood like a wall between the king and the queen's side of the room, his white cloak bright in the torchlight. Robert sat in a high-backed chair, not a throne but close enough that he could pretend. Bandages showed beneath his tunic. His hands gripped the chair arms. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes were furious and alive. Stannis stood to Robert's right, rigid and unsmiling. Eddard Stark stood to his left, grim, shoulders heavy as if carrying the weight of the realm on them. When Cersei entered, she did so as if stepping into court, not judgment. Jaime Lannister moved beside her, white cloak flowing, hand near sword. Joffrey came behind them, chin lifted high, a prince in silk and pride. He looked at Robert with a mixture of resentment and something like fear he refused to name. Robert's gaze locked on them. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The crackle of the hearth was loud. Rain drummed softly against the windows. Cersei smiled. "My husband," she said. "You look improved." Robert's mouth twisted. "Do I?" he rasped. His voice was rough, but the anger in it carried.
Come closer.
Cersei stepped forward without hesitation. Jaime moved with her, and Ser Barristan's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "Stop," Barristan said quietly, and Jaime halted, eyes narrowing. Cersei stopped as well, just out of reach. Her eyes flicked to Barristan, then back to Robert. "Is this necessary?" she asked softly. "Your wounds." "My wounds," Robert repeated. He leaned forward slightly, wincing, but he did not sit back. "Tell me, woman," he said, and the old contempt in his voice made the word woman sound like an insult. "How long did you think I'd sleep?" Cersei's smile held. "I thought only of your recovery." Stannis' voice cut in. "Liar," he said, flat as a hammer blow. Cersei's eyes flashed. "You have no right." "I have every right," Stannis said. "You committed treason." Joffrey's face reddened. "How dare you speak to my mother?" "Quiet," Robert snapped, and the sound of it startled even Joffrey into silence. Robert's eyes were fixed on the boy now, and something dark moved there. Not love, not pride, a searching, suspicious anger, like a man staring at a weapon he had once trusted. "Look at me," Robert commanded. Joffrey's chin lifted higher. "I am looking," he said, voice tight with defiance. Robert's gaze did not. "Leave him. You don't speak to me like that," he said. "Not ever." Joffrey's lips pressed together. His eyes flicked to Cersei, seeking permission, seeking assurance. Cersei's face remained composed, but her hand curled slightly at her side. Eddard Stark took a breath. "Your Grace," he said, voice low. "This is not about manners." Robert's gaze slid back to Cersei. "No," he agreed softly. "It's about blood." Cersei's smile froze for a fraction of a second, then returned. "What is this?" she asked, voice calm but edged. "What poison have you poured into his ear, Lord Stark?" "None," Eddard Stark said. He opened his mouth to speak further, then stopped, because Robert lifted a hand, silencing him. Robert's fingers trembled slightly. Weakness, fever, pain, but the gesture still carried authority. "Answer me," he said to Cersei. "Were you so eager to crown the boy that you bought the city watch and filled my halls with lions?" Cersei's eyes glittered. "I acted to protect our children," she said. "While your brothers moved against me while you slept, they would have taken the realm from your line." "Your line," Stannis echoed, and there was a bitter amusement in it. "Whose line is that? Cersei Lannister?" Jaime's hand moved. Ser Barristan's sword slid half an inch from its scabbard with a soft whisper of steel. The room tightened further. Cersei's gaze cut to Stannis. "Be careful," she said. "Accusations like that are truth," Stannis said. He stepped forward a half pace, eyes locked on her. "The children are not Robert's." Silence slammed down. Even Joffrey seemed to lose breath for a heartbeat. Cersei's expression did not break. If anything, it smoothed. "What a vile thing to say," she murmured. "A desperate, bitter lie." Robert's face contorted. For a moment, he looked like he might vomit. His hand gripped the chair arm until the wood creaked. Jaime's eyes flicked to Robert, then back to Stannis. His face was tense, jaw set, the look of a man cornered. "You'd better have proof," he said, voice low. Eddard Stark's voice came, steady and heavy. "Jon Arryn believed it," he said, "and he died for it. I have seen the evidence." Joffrey's face twisted. "This is madness," he snapped. "My father is the king." Robert's eyes snapped to him. "Am I?" Robert growled. "Or did you mean the one in the white cloak?" The word struck like a slap. Jaime's face hardened. Cersei's eyes flashed. "Robert," Cersei said softly, stepping forward another half pace, voice suddenly intimate, coaxing. "You are hurt. You are angry. You are being used by men who want to strip you of your heirs. Do you truly believe?" Robert surged forward, and pain hit him, but he rode it like rage. "I believe," he rasped, "that you have lied to me in my own bed." Cersei's face remained calm. "You have always wanted someone to blame," she said gently, "for your failures, for your misery. And now they offer you a monster in my shape." Robert's breathing was harsh. The room felt like it was waiting for blood. Stannis's voice was cold. "Arrest her," he said to Robert. "Now."
Eddard Stark's stomach twisted.
He knew what arresting Cersei meant. Lannister swords, Tywin's wrath.
Va.
Robert stared at Cersei for a long, trembling moment. Then he said, voice low, thick with pain and disbelief, "If it's true." Cersei's smile returned, soft. "It is not," she whispered. Robert's eyes flicked to Jaime. "Swear it," he said. "Swear on your white cloak that my children are mine." Jaime's throat moved. The room held its breath. His eyes met Cersei's, and in that look a lifetime passed. Twins in a womb, twins in a tower, secrets pressed into skin. Jaime's mouth opened, and before he could speak, the door at the far end of the chamber banged open. A guard stumbled in, drenched from rain, eyes wide. "Your Grace," he gasped. "There's trouble in the yard, Storm's End men and the gold cloaks. Someone tried to..." The sentence dissolved into chaos. Men turned. Hands went to swords. For one heartbeat, everything balanced on an edge. Then the room broke into motion. The courtyard was a slick bowl of mud and rain and shouting. The Red Keep's inner yard, usually a place of drills and lazy gossip, had become a sudden battlefield the moment men decided they would rather fight than obey. Gold cloaks pushed in a loose wedge, batons and swords raised. Baratheon guards, Renly's men from Storm's End and a handful of Stannis' hard-faced soldiers, met them with steel. Someone had already fallen. A man lay in the mud with his arm bent wrong, rain filling his open mouth. Another crawled toward the archway, leaving a smear of red behind him like paint. Renly Baratheon was there, cloak soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, the smile gone. He shouted orders with surprising sharpness, his voice cutting through the roar. "Hold!" he snapped. "No killing. Gods damn you, no killing." Men rarely listened when fear took them. Davos Seaworth grabbed a young soldier by the shoulder and yanked him back just as a blade flashed where his throat had been. "Stay alive," Davos snarled. "Alive is useful." Ser Barristan Selmy moved through the chaos like an answer to a prayer. White cloak darkened by rain, sword in hand, he did not swing wildly. He stepped, parried, struck with precise control. A gold cloak rushed him. Barristan turned, the blade flicking, and the man's sword flew from his hand. Barristan kicked it away and shoved him back with the flat of his own steel. "Down," he barked. "Down or you die." The gold cloak fell to his knees, eyes wide, rain and terror washing his face. At the edge of the yard, courtiers watched from under the shelter of arcades, their faces pale. Some clutched each other, some whispered, eyes glittering. Violence in the Red Keep was a feast for rumor. Renly shoved his way toward Janos Slynt, who stood behind a knot of gold cloaks with his baton raised, face flushed with panic and authority. "What are you doing?" Renly shouted. "Stand them down." Janos's eyes darted. "Orders," he shouted back. From who?" Renly snapped, grabbing him by the front of his cloak and yanking him close. Rain streamed down Renly's face, and for once he looked less like a lord and more like a Baratheon, storm and fury. "From Cersei? From Peter Baelish? From your own fear?" Janos's mouth worked. "The Queen!" She said. "The King," she said. "The King is awake," Renly snarled. "And if your men spill blood in his yard, he will hang you from the battlements and feed you to crows." Janos blanched. His gaze flicked toward the tower windows above, where dark shapes moved behind curtains. He swallowed. "Stand down!" he bellowed at his men, voice cracking. "Stand down!" Some obeyed at once, relief in their movements. Others hesitated, batons still raised, caught between habit and fear. A blade flashed again. A man screamed. Stannis Baratheon appeared at the archway like a shadow made solid, rain streaking his face, eyes hard. He took in the chaos in a heartbeat. "Enough!" he roared. Not loudly, not theatrically, but with a force that snapped heads toward him. His soldiers obeyed immediately, stepping back into formation. Renly's men followed, breathing hard, eyes wild. The gold cloaks wavered, then lowered weapons with reluctant clatter. Stannis's gaze cut to Janos Slynt. "You," he said, voice flat as stone. "On your knees." Janos stared at him as if not understanding. "My lord, on your knees," Stannis repeated. Janos's baton slipped in his wet hand. He dropped to his knees in the mud, splashing. The sight of the commander kneeling did what orders could not. The remaining gold cloaks stepped back, uncertain, suddenly aware of the cliff beneath their feet. Stannis turned his gaze upward, toward the tower where Robert waited. "Bring him," he said to Barristan. Barristan's face tightened. His wound. "Bring him," Stannis said again, and there was no room to argue. "He must be seen." They must know whose yard this is. Rain hammered down. The courtyard stank of wet leather and blood. Men stood in lines now, swords lowered, faces pale. They looked less like warriors and more like boys caught stealing. When Robert Baratheon appeared at the balcony above, dragged in his chair by grim-faced guards, Ned Stark at his side, the entire yard seemed to freeze. Robert's face was gray with pain. Sweat shone on his brow, but his eyes blazed. He looked down at the mud, at the fallen men, at Janos Slint kneeling like a dog. His mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it wasn't so full of rage. "Who?" he rasped, voice carrying even through rain. "Dared draw steel in my castle?" No one answered. Even the rain seemed to quiet, listening. Robert's gaze fixed on Janos. "You," he said. Janos's face went white. "Your Grace," he stammered. I was keeping order." Robert leaned forward slightly, wincing, but refusing to sit back. "Order?" he snarled. "You call this order?" Janos trembled. "The Queen." Robert's voice cracked like thunder. "The Queen does not command my men," he roared. The sound tore through him. He coughed, grimacing, but he did not retreat. "Ido." He pointed a shaking finger. "Seize him," he rasped. Gold cloaks flinched. Some stepped back. Baratheon guards surged forward. Janos's eyes went wide, and he tried to scramble up, but hands seized him, forcing him down. Mud smeared his armor. Robert's breath rasped. He looked down at the yard, at the men standing in rain with lowered swords. "Any man who raises steel against my blood," he said, voice lower now, more dangerous, "will lose the hand that holds it." The words sank into the mud and the bones of the men who heard them. In the arcades, courtiers whispered, eyes glittering. In the yard, soldiers stared up at a king who looked half dead and still frightening. Ned Stark stood beside Robert on the balcony and felt both relief and dread. Robert's presence had stopped the fight, but it had also drawn a line so deep it could not be smoothed over. The Red Keep had tasted BL. Would again, and it would remember. They dragged Robert back inside before the rain could finish what the Boar had begun. The exertion had reopened something. When the guards set him down in the dim chamber near his rooms, Ned Stark saw the dark seep through the bandage like ink spreading on paper. "Cloth?" Ned Stark snapped, and a servant thrust linen into his hands. He pressed it to Robert's side, feeling heat and wet and the awful tremor of a body refusing to yield. Robert's face was slick with sweat, teeth clenched. He tried to wave Ned Stark away. "It's nothing," he rasped, the lie almost convincing through sheer stubbornness. "It is not nothing," Ned Stark said, voice tight. He did not look up, because if he did he would see the men who had done this. Not the gold cloaks in the yard, but the ones in the room, the ones with crowns and claims. Stannis stood near the hearth, rain still dripping from his cloak, face carved from anger. Renly paced like a caged animal, soaked, mud splattered along his boots, his charm stripped away by fury. Ser Barristan Selmy stood between them, sword held point down, as if ready to raise it in either direction if the brothers turned on each other. Cersei watched from the doorway, her gown dry. She had not gone into the rain. Her face was calm, but her eyes glittered, sharp and watchful. Jaime was not with her. Joffrey was not with her. Cersei had retreated to gather pieces while men bled. Robert sucked in a breath and hissed. "Gods!" he muttered. "It's like being stabbed all over again." Ned Stark leaned closer, voice low. "You must rest," he said, "or you will die." Robert's eyes snapped to him, furious. "I will not die in a bed," he rasped. "Not while they—" He stopped, coughing, and the cough dragged blood into his mouth. He spat it into the cloth Ned Stark held and cursed. Renly's voice cut in raw. "This is madness," he said. "We're going to have a war inside the walls before we ever face Tywin." Stannis' eyes flashed. "We already have," he said. "The Lannisters began it. I only named it." Renly spun on him. "You always name things," he snapped, "as if naming makes you righteous." Stannis stepped forward, slow, dangerous. "And you always smile," he said, "as if smiling makes you safe."
Ser barristan shifted, sword lifting a fraction.
"Enough," he said, voice like iron. "Not here." Robert's head lifted, eyes blazing despite the gray pallor of his skin. "Here," he rasped, "is exactly where." Silence fell. Even Renly stopped pacing. Stannis's jaw tightened. Robert's gaze swept the room. Stannis hard as stone, Renly bright and furious, Barristan a wall, Eddard Stark bleeding cloth in his hands, Cersei in the doorway like a poised blade. "You," Robert said to Stannis, voice rough, "you came to my city and put your men in my halls." Stannis did not deny it. "I did," he said. Robert's eyes flicked to Renly. "And you," he said, "you've been sending ravens and whispering with Tyrells while I lay in poppy sleep." Nly's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes flared. "I have been trying to keep us alive," he said. "All of us, you included." Robert's lip curled. "You included," he repeated, and there was contempt in it, but also something else, recognition, perhaps, that both brothers believed themselves saviors. Robert's gaze shifted to Cersei. "And you," he rasped, "you filled my halls with lions and bought my watch." Cersei's voice was soft. "I protected your children," she said, "while your brothers circled like vultures." Stannis's voice was cold. "Your children," he said again, and the words carried like a knife across skin. Cersei's eyes flashed. "You will not." Robert raised a trembling hand, cutting her off. His breathing was harsh, pain making each word an effort. "I have heard enough," he said, voice low and thick, "of orders in my name, of men deciding what is mine." He swallowed, grimacing. Thunder rumbled outside, distant but heavy, as if the sky itself were reminding them whose house ruled storms. "From this moment," Robert said, and his voice steadied, not because he was less weak, but because he was committing himself. "No man speaks in my name without my leave. No seal is pressed without my hand or Ned's. No gold cloak answers to anyone but me." He looked at Stannis. "You will keep your men," he said, "but you will not command my castle. Not unless I say." Stannis's jaw tightened. "As you command," he said, stiff, and the words sounded like submission carved from stone. Robert looked at Renly. "You will stop sending ravens behind my back," he rasped. "If you want allies, you ask me. You do not build your own court while I bleed." Renly's mouth tightened. For a heartbeat, he looked like a boy being scolded. Then the mask returned, thin and bright. "As you wish," he said, and the words sounded like obedience wrapped around defiance. Robert's gaze returned to Cersei. The room felt like it held its breath. Eddard Stark felt his own heart pounding, because this was the edge of a cliff. Robert's voice dropped, almost quiet. "You," he said, "you will remain in your apartments, under guard." Cersei's smile froze. "You cannot imprison your queen," she said softly. Robert's eyes were murder. "Watch me," he rasped, echoing Stannis's earlier words with bitter satisfaction. "Until I know the truth." Cersei's face remained composed, but something sharp moved beneath it. "You will regret this," she whispered. Robert leaned forward, wincing, cloth dark with his blood under Eddard Stark's hand. "I regret marrying you," he said hoarsely. The words struck like a blow. For a heartbeat, Cersei looked as if she might speak, might scream, might shatter. Then her face smoothed again into cold perfection. "If you insist," she said softly, and stepped back into the corridor. Eddard Stark watched her go and felt the chill of it. Cersei Lannister did not retreat because she was defeated. She retreated because she was planning. Robert slumped back. "Brait."
Ashedring.
His eyes closed for a moment, not in surrender, but in sheer exhaustion. When he opened them again, they were fixed on Eddard Stark, and in them was a grim clarity. "Ned," he rasped, "if they took my throne while I slept, I will show them what it costs." Outside, thunder rolled closer. The storm was coming in from the sea, and within the Red Keep, the first drops had already fallen.